Okay. All right, let's get started. Welcome. Bienvenidos y burun todos a Charla Show. Nuestra musafira de hoy es mi amiga la profesora Jane Mushabac, que está con nosotros de su casa en New York. Welcome, bienvenidos, and burun everybody to a Charla Show. Our guest today is my friend Professor Jane Mushabac, who is with us today from her home in New York. Dr. Jane Mushabac, who is a writer, has won fellowships from the Mellon Foundation, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and Harvard University. Her 70 publications include 3 books, an award-winning novel about Turkish Jews, and 2 other highly acclaimed books. Short stories and essays, including her works in Ladino, in periodicals and anthologies, and a CD commissioned by National Public Radio about Spanish Jews. Her writing has been translated into Turkish, Bulgarian, German, Russian, and Ladino. Her work has been presented in theaters, and she's given numerous invited lectures and readings. Her writing has been praised in the New York Times, Sewanee Review, The Village Voice, and elsewhere. She spearheaded and curates ASF's, the American Sephardi Federation's New York Ladino Day, now in its 5th year. On a personal note, I first met Jane on December 1st, 2013. You ask how I know the exact date, because Google Pictures tagged the date and location of the date the picture was taken. After a Gerard Edery concert at the Museum of Jewish History on 16th Street with a group from Ladino Comunità. And afterwards, we all went to dinner at the Turkish kitchen where I sat across from Jane. Now I want to repeat all this in Ladino, since this is a Charla Show. La doctora Jane Mushabac, que es una escritora, ganó fellowships, no sé cómo se dice fellowships en Ladino, de la Fundación Mellon, the National Endowment for the Humanities de Harvard University. Sus 70 publicaciones incluyen 3 libros, una novela premiada sobre judíos turcos y otros 2 libros alabados. Publicó consejos cortos y otros escritos en periódicos y antologías, incluidas obras en ladino. Y hizo un CD que se encomendó por National Public Radio, NPR, sobre los judíos de España. Sus escrituras se tradujeron al turco, búlgaro, alemán, ruso y ladino. Sus obras se presentaron en teatros y ella era invitada a muchas conferencias y medalluras. Sus escrituras se hizo alabado en las gacetas New York Times, Sewanee Review, Village Voice y otros lugares. Ella empezó y mantiene el Día de Ladino de New York de la American Sephardi Federation, ahora en su 5º año. Personalmente, yo la conocí a Jane primera vez el 1 de diciembre de 2013. Estás demandando, ¿cómo es la data exacta? Porque Google Pictures me dijo cuando y dónde se grabó el foto que tengo en YouTube con Jane. Después de un concierto de Gerard Edery en el Museo de Jewish History en la calle 16, con un grupo de Ladino Comunità. Y después todos nos fuimos a comer a un restaurante que se llama Turkish Kitchen. Y yo me asentí en frente de Jane. Now I give you my friend Jane Mushabac. Welcome to Boynton Beach, Jane. Let's get started. We're curious, Jane. What did your Sephardic family have to do with you becoming a writer? Tell us about your family and how you became a writer.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to see you. And thank you, Jake, so much. I'm just delighted and honored to be on a Charla Show today. So I've been getting to know Jake and Susan since 2017, when Ladino Comunità came to visit New York City. So did you know, this gathered group here, that Jake and I are in a play that was directed and produced by Rachel Bortnick in early December. And in fact, Jake and I are the leads in Act Two. So it's called El Nes de Hanukkah. And I've been getting to know Jake. And so I learned he's not just a wonderful, remarkable Sephardic leader, but he's also a shakaji, a prankster. He tells people stuff. So for instance, about that play, he emailed me and said, oh, you know that our play was posted to YouTube, and we all were in Rachel's class watching it together. Where were you? How come you missed that class? I bought it, and I mean, I bought what he said, and then I realized he was pulling my leg because it wasn't on YouTube. But two days later, actually December 5th, which was the last night of Hanukkah, which was perfect because that's what the play is about. It was posted. So a Shaka G and a truth teller, it turns out. So you can watch it on YouTube, El Nes de Hanukkah. Anyway, yes, I'm a writer. Thank you so much. In 1969, I had 2 articles published in The Village Voice, and really haven't stopped since. Although I've done other things, of course. Books, I mean, I've written books and articles and stories and so on. I really, it's been wonderful. I want to tell you some of my experiences as a writer, and also share excerpts from 4 of my Sephardic writings. Mazal Bueno, Pasha, His 100 Years a Tale, and Un Otro Hermano. But let me get to your wonderful question, Jake. I have to say that, you know, we on these programs, Jake sent me the questions in advance, and this question is that he asked just now is so wonderful for me that I decided I wanted to write an answer. So it taps into so many things. So forgive me, I'm going to read this little section here. It started when, as a child growing up on 10th Street in Greenwich Village in Manhattan, I fell in love with my father. Also with my mother, the city, the ocean at Long Beach, New York, and the mysteries I could never solve, mysteries about joy and about monstrous evil. I became addicted to the mysteries. Writers are always addicted to the mysteries of life. I picture my father holding up his wine glass, singing the blessings in Hebrew at our cramped dining room table, squeezed in the front hall of our small apartment. He loved the Hebrew. The bitter fighting between my parents had to stop as he sang. He loved singing. After a long day of work, his daily Borei Puri Hagafen, and usually the Shekianu for good measure, gave us a moment to breathe and celebrate with the pre-cell phone image of a gorgeous spread of Sephardic cooking on the table. I loved the city streets, crossing 10th Street alone as a child to buy a pickle at Reuben's Deli, and later a live lobster in a brown paper bag at the fish store for my mother. Playing a game I made up of getting myself lost, playing street ball after dinner every night with neighbor children, the many friends living right there, the mix of people from the Yiddish celebrity Maurice Schwartz across the street, to a poor woman with a pointy chin way down the block who delivered flowers for the Greek florist. I was free to explore the post-World War II streets, to sell my old comic books for a nickel on University Place, and later in Washington Square Park, silver jewelry I'd made. Okay, here's my family. My family on both sides came from Çanakkale in Turkey on the Strait of Dardanelles. My father's parents came to New York in 1920 with their 4 teenagers to join their 2 older children already here. My mother's parents came younger and earlier, both by 1911, first her father and then her mother. My mother herself was born in the Bronx, but grew up with her grandparents and her parents in a little house in Pelham Bay. Relatives have always said that my mother was more Turkish than any of them. Look, we didn't have the paradise of densely packed Sephardic Seattle that Al Maimon and Rabbi Mark Angel have so lovingly described. But every summer, our family of 5 shared a small house my mother was clever enough to buy for a pittance in 1939, a few blocks from the Atlantic Ocean, with her parents and her brother's family of 4. And during my childhood, we often went to my father's sister in New Jersey, where cousins overpoured the house and Sephardic food the table. And my father's mother lived for several years there as well. So our Sephardic feast of sociability and enjoyment, it was more spread out, but we still had the Ladino songs and insults, the pastra games and seshbesh, which means backgammon, the dichas, the proverbs, the berinjena, the eggplant, enginara, the artichokes, the fasul, the borecas, the whole rich, amazing Sephardic thing. Let's talk about writing contests. My mother was dreadfully hemmed in by her Turkish patriarchal father. Unlike her brother, she had no chance of a bicycle, sled, canoe, college degree, or a career. It was all off limits to girls. And the denial made her fierce. This kind of denial, by the way, was not just a Turkish problem. My mother became one of a large generation of American women determined to see their daughters become something. So my mother, once she saw that I was writing a monthly column for the high school newspaper, decided I should enter a writing contest. The subject was, of all things, the merchant marine. And there was no Google in those days. I had no intention of entering that weird contest on a subject I had never heard of. But after putting it off, when the deadline got near, instead of flat out saying, no, I absolutely will not do this stupid thing, like a real dope, a bova, an hija de la bova, I asked my mother, do I have to write this thing? My mother barked the way her father used to bark at her. Yes. So I did, and won the next one and the next, and so on. In fact, what are the Mellon and Harvard fellowships and many of these awards I've received but the results of submissions to contests? And once you've won and are published, you're in the conversation. You get asked for your writing. You get commissions from editors and others for stories, plays, articles, essays. My most recent example is Aki Yerushalayim, the long-established Israeli Ladino journal, asked me this summer to write something for their fall 2021 issue. And I wrote a new Ladino short story, which I excerpted and adapted as a short play. It will premiere with English subtitles at the 5th annual New York Ladino Day on January 30th. But let's go back. As you all probably know or remember, 1992 was the 500th anniversary of the expulsion of the Jews from Spain. So around 1990, things started really hopping with commissions for Sephardic work. People suddenly wanted to know about Sephardic Jews. Amazing. Yeshiva University Museum planned an exhibit and a book to go with it, The Sephardic Journey, 1492 to 1992. And they asked me to translate a Ladino article on Proverbs by Matilda Cohen Serrano for the book. Yeshiva also wanted to exhibit items I had in their, in their museum show, items I had from my grandmother's 1911 trousseau from Turkey, which include a magnificent hand-embroidered wall hanging and her embroidered undergarments, like her French-style bloomers. A Gabe Goldstein came to see the ashugar, the trousseau, which I spread out on our dining room table. He was shy, but talked very fast, and he took everything, and I made sure Yeshiva had proper insurance. But most thrilling was when a great musical ensemble called the Western Wind Vocal Ensemble commissioned me to write the dramatic narrative for a 1-hour National Public Radio broadcast on Columbus Day, 1992. Mazal Bueno, a portrait in song of the Spanish Jews. I decided the person to narrate the story in this narrative should be my grandmother, long gone, of course, but writing in her voice the story of her life in Turkey as a mother was the greatest treat. Her story would be interwoven with Ladino songs by the ensemble. The ensemble asked Meryl Streep, because of her Sephardic heritage, to play my grandmother. And when she wanted to actually, but she was too busy, another famous star was asked, Edie Gourmet, whose family, probably related to mine, was all from Çanakkale. Ultimately, we got the great Tova Feldshuh to play Joya Mushabac. There was a packed concert at New York City's Merkin Hall, the NPR broadcast, and then the CD. I'll play a bit of the opening of it for you now.
Do you think raising 8 children, I had time to... I am Joya Mushabac. We are Jews. Somos judíos. I gave birth to 8 children. Pari ocho. Do you think raising 8 children, baking 20 loaves of bread a week, our town is Dardanelles in Turkey, we lived here for centuries. Do you think raising 8 children, I had time to sing? You make me laugh. Can you raise children without singing?
Oh, man. Sorry, wait a second. I'm going to start it again. Little computer glitch.
I am Joya Mushabac. We are Jews. Somos judíos. I gave birth to 8 children. Pari ocho. Do you think raising 8 children, baking 20 loaves of bread a week, our town is Dardanelles in Turkey, we lived here for centuries. Do you think raising 8 children, I had time to sing? You make me laugh. Can you raise children without singing? Pariva, mother of the unicorn. What did you have, a boy or a girl?
Youre, marido, con los convidados, ya traen su mano, está de buen pescado, y en la otra mano está de ducados. Vino tu vino, todo que se vino, las vida y cuando morir, y también la marida, y los pagos, es bonita.
They brought me fish. They feasted. They forgot only one thing, to bring any food to me, the parida. What? A roasted hen.
Se acerca el marido a los pies de la cama, se quiso la marida, y yo comió, esto que me tragando, y no es arreglado, esto que me tragando, y no es arreglado.
Can you be Jewish without singing? Bless the bread, the sunlight, the dwarf who lives next door. Bless the burrekas, the wine, the raki, that God only took 2 of my children. Bless my husband. Bless the white cloth I sewed to make a canopy so the chinchas, the bedbugs, won't bite my husband. How he hates those bedbugs. He is a scholar. He studied in Palestine. Every Shabbat the men come and study the law. He is so learned. I wish you could know my husband. But most of all, bless the children. Mashallah, mashallah, rock them to sleep.
Hi. I think, Jake, you had another question? Oh, I can't hear you, Jake.
I have to unmute myself. I'm going to divert from the script for a second. When we were in New York last month for the gala, we saw Tova Belshaw at the Museum of Jewish Heritage playing Becoming Dr. Ruth. So we met her. You wrote Mazal Bueno in English, although it includes Ladino expressions and Ladino songs. We'd love to hear about the first short story, which you wrote entirely in Ladino, Pasha, and perhaps you could read us a little of it in Ladino.
Okay, thank you. So, oops. I did the wrong thing. Hang on. Yeah, so the first story I wrote in Ladino was for Midstream. Midstream was a well-known New York Zionist magazine, which since 1955 published greats like I.B. Singer, Eli Wiesel, Cynthia Ozick. In the early 2000s, Midstream started something phenomenal, an annual Yiddish Ladino issue. Since I was known as a Sephardic writer, I was asked to review a collection of the writings of Abraham Miguel Cardozo. Who is he? A 17th century Sephardic mystic. I was flattered, of course, and received the review copy of the book, but I was not a scholar of Sephardic history. So I had to do something, figure this out. I sat on my bed with a pile of about 50 Hadassah magazines to find a current Sephardic book that would excite me. My Hadassah magazines had piled up for years without my having time to read them. It had taken me 14 years to write my first 2 books, one on the great American writer Herman Melville. I was in fact a Melville scholar, and the other on the great American city, New York. In Hadassah, I found exactly what I wanted. Instead of a collection of Cardozo's Kabbalistic writings, I would review Matilda Cohen Serrano's collection of Johas stories. My father told Johas stories. Perfect. The book had just come out. Wonderful editor Leo Haber had never heard of Johas, but of course he agreed. The following year, Leo asked me to find a Ladino story and translate it into English. But again, I changed the assignment. And some years later, I met two performers at the Dome nightclub, I think that's the name of it, two great ethnomusicologists, whom you know, one of them anyway, Judith Cohn and Joff Clarfield. Joff said he'd accompany me on the oud if I recorded my Pasha story. I'm going to play a little bit of that recording. You will be surprised by the main character in this story. He's very different from the sweet, nurturing main character, Joya, in Mazal Bueno. Each story I write, not surprisingly, is different. This man doesn't know it, but he's in crisis, the main character of Pasha, the Pasha. He's in crisis first with his father and then with his wife. But it's a tale about manhood. Okay, let's see if I can get this up easily. All right, here we go. This should be... Hello, come on.
I'm going to read my short story, Pasha, Ruminations of David Araghetti. I'm Jane Mushabac. I'll say a few words first. I wrote the story in Judeo-Spanish, Ladino. The editor of an eminent Jewish review, Midstream, had asked me to find a story in Ladino and translate it into English for his journal. I said, great, but when I got started, I found I didn't feel like doing research. I decided to write a story in Ladino myself and translate it into English. I did, and Midstream published the story in its Yiddish Ladino issue. In 2011, my original Ladino version appeared in Sephardic Horizons. I've done versions of the story in Ladino and in English, in California, Boston, and New York. I'll read it in English now. Two things. You probably know the word Pasha. It's a high-ranking Turkish official. In the story, the use of the word is ironic, since the character, when we meet him, has nothing, not a cent. The story is from a period when the Ottoman Empire was badly deteriorated after a centuries-long decline. Ladino, of course, includes vocabulary from Turkish, Hebrew, Arabic, and Greek. Oh yes, I wrote the story under a pen name, Shalak Manot, a Hebrew expression that refers to the gifts of food Jews give to friends and family on the holiday of Purim. Ruminations of David Araghetti. I am David Araghetti, Turkish Jew. Everyone knows there are two types of people. Those who are seen as the Pasha, who are big and have a manner which tells the whole world that they are important, who are strong, who speak with authority, directly, saying what they want, and of course, expecting to receive it, and that everyone will listen to them. It does not matter if they are, what is the word, stout. It is better because no wind can blow them aside, and there is no one who can change their mind or ideas on something. Don't be stupid. Yes, they can change their opinions or ideas. But from the beginning, from the first, this kind of person says something with vigor and force. And afterwards, no matter, with the same force, he says the opposite, with the same fierceness, with a clear eye, and he doesn't have to explain to anyone why he changed his mind. It does not matter why. Now it is what it is, and everyone must listen and do what he says.
I'm going to read another short section from the story, and then I'll read the opening that you just heard. I'll read that in Ladino. So let's see. So this is David Araghetti continuing. I am going to tell you something, that I am not a musician like my father. My father played the violin. It was a thing of the heart. The Turkish music that came was a thing, it was a thing of the heart. The Turkish music that came from the box of wood, a box in the form of the body of a woman with curves and openings that no one should think about, and which sang the glory of the new century with an ancient heart from old centuries in Spain. Let me tell you a story of what happened in my house when I was a boy in Turkey. I wanted to play this violin, but I wasn't the oldest son of the family. My father said every day that I couldn't touch his violin, not even with my little finger. It is for the first son, your older brother, and you must never forget that. Every day, with my eyes full, I saw that the violin was not for me. The first son was going to inherit the violin, and with it, the life and work of a musician. One day, my father and my brother were not home. No one was home, just me. There was the room where usually my father taught my brother to play the violin and put his name on the art of Turkish music. Hour after hour, day after day, leaving me outside the room, listening and thinking about the life of the second son, a life with nothing. On this day, the door of the room was closed, but nobody was home. I opened the door, and there it was. The violin was there on the table, like a golden bird, looking at me timidly with interest. Of course, I took it right away in my hand. I wanted to play, but I knew nothing, only the sound I wanted to hear. The way of standing with the violin in my hand, the bow in my fingers, the violin under my chin, like a religious priest. I put the bow on the strings, first calmly, and then with a great wild vigor, even though I did not know what I was doing, and the sounds that I made were nothing like the sweet melody in my head. Suddenly, the door opened, and there was my father, furious. Put it down, he barked at me. And of course I did. With fear and care, I put the violin on the table, just as my father said. Of course, I was his son, and when my father told me something, no questions asked, I did what he told me, without thinking of anything else. The violin looked at me from the table, while my father came over to me and smacked me in the head. Never, never, never. The musician is going to be your older brother. My violin is for my first son. Actually, my father didn't say a word to me, but his hand on my head 1, 2, 3 times said it all. And I never played violin again in Turkey. So that was an excerpt. And now I will read the opening, which you heard a minute ago. I'll read it as I wrote it in Ladino. So, David Araghetti, judío turco. Todos saben que hay dos clases de gente, los que se ven como patrones, que son grandes y tienen una manera que dice al mundo entero que son importantes, que son fuertes, que hablan con fuerza directamente, diciendo lo que quieren y piensan, y por seguro contando con recibirlo, y que todos van a escucharles. No importa que ellos son, ¿cuál es la palabra? Godros, es mejor, porque no hay aire que pueda soplarlos a un lado, no hay persona que pueda trocar sus ideas. No te espantes, lado. Sí, puede trocar de opiniones o ideas, mas al principio, desde el primer momento, esta clase de persona habla con fuerza. Y después, no importa, con el mismo poder, dice el contrario con la misma fuerza, con el ojo claro. Y no tiene que explicar a ninguno el motivo por el trocamiento. No importa, ahora es lo que es y todos deben escuchar y hacer todo lo que dice.
Thank you, Jane. Both versions, very descriptive. Your novel about Turkish Jews, His 100 Years, A Tale, came out in 2016. Tell us about that one.
Thank you. Here we go. Yeah, His 100 Years, A Tale, is a novel about a Turkish Jewish boy living by his wits in early 1900s Ottoman Turkey. His family has no money. There's a war, a famine, there's a donkey. Selling is something he loved to do. Shirts, headscarves, matches, buttons, whatever. Selling is his passion in Turkey and in New York when he gets there at age 19. He's scrappy, an everyman. He has no name in the book. He's just the boy and later the man and the salesman and the insurance salesman and so on. Each chapter is titled with a specific place and year. The chapters are short and go back and forth in time. I'll read 110th Street and 5th Avenue, 1920. Thank you, friends Elsa and Boris Farbiaz, for suggesting I read this chapter today. "110th Street and 5th Avenue, 1920. He saw that on Sundays, Italian families bought balloons for their children. The families walked the few blocks to the park and in front of the stone wall under the shade of the trees, bought a balloon for each child. They didn't just buy for one child, bought for them all. He stood and watched. This was a different country. He couldn't go talk to his mother's cousin. He had nothing to sell, no one to sell to. There were no mosques, no cafes, and no one was selling trousers door to door or eggs or wheat. A small church on the corner was very different from a mosque. Nobody went there 5 times a day, and it was closed and empty most of the time. It was lonely in the apartment at the top of a tenement in a sea of 5-story stone buildings in the hot city on Lexington Avenue at 112th Street. Each building with a fire escape set on its face like a crooked iron mask. He had sung Samyotisa, Samyotisa, all the way across the ocean, goodbye to the girl he was leaving behind, a Greek song of longing and farewell. But the girl was no girl, rather his childhood of melons, donkeys, lettuce on a stoop, a caravan of carts of wheat, the countryside, the sky wildly open to breezes from the sea. And the men, like his father, in fezzes, saying prayers in Hebrew. All traded in for what? For being a nobody on cluttered, hot tenement streets lined along a cement pavement, buildings packed with families on each floor, speaking languages he didn't know. The balloon man spoke Greek, which the boy knew, so he could watch and charm the details out of him, casually, admiringly, about the $25 tank, which the boy then would lug up the 4 flights to his apartment where he was living with his brothers and sisters, and a $1 gross of balloons. And where to get these supplies? The boy wouldn't need English, which he didn't have, just 2 words, 10 cents. So he blossomed like a young balloon tree on the perfect spot he found, uptown from the Greek, on the corner of 110th Street and 5th Avenue, 5 blocks from his home. He blew the balloons up in the apartment, carried them down the 4 flights, and set himself up in business, watching for the Italian families who came right up to him. He was the man they wanted, the American balloon man, to make a happy day for the family. He had figured out a way to be a breadwinner because he and his brothers and sisters in the small apartment needed money, and their parents had been stopped from coming here. He and his sisters played with the baby of his married brother and sang French songs until Chanton Victoire, from the story of Judah Maccabee, became an empty chant rather than the call to triumph it needed to be. Oh, and how many times would playing with the 1-year-old and teaching him to count in French be enough? There was no money in it. The boy's father was still in Turkey. With the balloons, the boy felt a rush of hope, but he said nothing. He kept his mouth shut, collecting dimes. He'd kept his eyes alert, starting early in the morning, carrying the heavy helium tank up the 4 flights, blowing up 30 balloons, rushing down the stairs with them, selling them in a flustered panic, dashing the 5 blocks home, rushing up the stairs, getting 30 more balloons, leaving behind his money, his cap always firmly on his head, giving him dignity in the midst of all this dashing and determination like in a movie reel. It was Sunday, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. With so many people, could he lose? It was a real day for the park. He was hungry. He figured he'd sell what he had and then go home and eat. A crowd of people was waiting to buy balloons from him. He was standing there, pulling a red balloon out from the bunch, when a policeman came over. What did the man want? Why did the man grab him and pull him down the street? At the precinct, no one understood Spanish, and they put him in a wagon. He was riding 3/4 of an hour. His balloons were dying. Everybody out! He didn't know where he was. No speak English. Nobody spoke Spanish, French, Greek. Nobody spoke Turkish, Hebrew. The words of all the languages he knew fell away from him. He was worried about the balloons. They were shrinking up. The police put him in a building. They put him in a room and locked him in. He was inside with a half dozen people. He was only in the country 3-4 weeks. What did he do wrong? He was crying. He was losing money. If he took the air out of the balloons, they would be no good. It was already 5-6 o'clock. He hadn't eaten lunch, hadn't eaten supper. The judge didn't come in until 10 o'clock at night. The boy was more worried about the balloons than he was about himself. He had his cap, his hat. The policeman said, "Come with me." He was in front of the judge and a policeman was yelling at him. What was going on? A man came over and slapped him on his head. His hat went a mile away in the huge room. Now he ran after the hat. All he was worried about was the hat. What did the judge say? Maybe it was something about the hat. The boy didn't know. But then suddenly he was outside on a trolley, first one, and then when he saw it was going in the wrong direction, another, until he got home to his brothers and sisters. Don't worry, they said, when he told them what had happened, his future taken from him in one miserable day. He wanted to go home to Turkey. His friends were there and the breeze from the sea. So don't sell on Fifth Avenue, they told him, guessing. He didn't know. He didn't read signs and he had no regrets. Even on the ship, when he put his head through the porthole, he didn't take off his hat. He had put his hand on his hat and it stayed put. And with his face out in the middle of the sea, everything was beautiful.
Thank you. You have a slideshow of some of the books and magazines. Oh, by the way, in the chat, if you look in the chat, Bob put down the link to Amazon where you can purchase the book.
Oh, thank you, Bob. You're great.
So you can go to that. You have a slideshow on some of the books.
Also,
and
the links to
magazines.
your website to purchase anything else you have on.
Right.
Okay.
You have
And
a slide?
yeah, I have a slideshow. Thank you, Jake, so much. And by the way, if you want to read the whole Pasha story in Ladino or in English, they're both online and you'll find that on my website. So I had the great fun of just making a slideshow of the covers of some of the magazines and books where my writing has been published, and also the covers of my own 3 books. I won't be talking, I'm just going to show you the slideshow. I won't be talking about anything except when you see the 3rd book on the screen about Turkish immigrants, I want you to know that Jake has an essay in that book as well. So watch for that. Are we good? Oh, I forgot to,
Yep, you have to share.
I have to click share.
And
Shares.
don't forget the 2 little boxes on the bottom.
I'm hoping I don't have to click those because, where is this? Hello, it should be right here. Yes, here it is. Okay. I'm hoping this works.
You got it.
Okay, good. So
Go
here,
to the slideshow. Don't forget to go.
oh
to the
yeah,
slideshow.
slideshow, here we go. There's the CD. Uh-oh, stuck. Oh, It got stuck. Okay, go to the next one. Whoop. I don't know why. That ever happen? It gets stuck? Let's try it again. Okay. Okay.
Okay, should I take over?
Yes, please.
Okay, in 2020, you co-wrote a short Ladino play, Un Otro Hermano, which was performed on last year's New York Ladino Day Zoom. Now it's on YouTube with English subtitles. That's the fourth work of yours you wanted to present today. And now I'm going to show that on the screen share. If you give me a second, I will take it over.
Some of you may have seen this on Ladino Day, but it didn't have English subtitles at that point. Now it's a YouTube.
Okay, can we see it? Can I start?
Start. Sounds great. Thank you.
We're not seeing the screen share, Jake.
You're not? Hold on. Let me go back. Let me stop. 1 second. Let me.
When you do the screen share,
Okay. Here we go.
remember to click share audio on the bottom left.
Yeah. 1 second. How's it now?
Make it full screen. The play you are going to see, Un Otro Hermano, Another Brother, is by Jane Mushabac and Leah Varsano. It takes place in January 2020 on a late Sunday afternoon in the kitchen of Sultana's apartment on Manhattan's Upper West Side. Sultana is a 50-year-old visual artist and painter. She has asked her brother Joe to come over to discuss something of importance. He is 54, a medical doctor with a patriarchal bearing. Their mother is 85. The actors are Robin Perros, Leah Varsano, Bob Freud, and Jane Mushabac.
Sultana acrecenta cosas en el mupac. Se siente voz de batir en la puerta. Sultana abre la puerta, Joe entra y los dos van al mupac.
Arrivates. Bueno, fueron.
Buenos tardes, ¿cómo estás? ¿Qué haber?
¿Quieres algo? ¿Chai?
No, estoy bueno.
Allora, chai. ¿Preto? ¿Está bien?
Fine. ¿Por qué quisiste que venga aquí ante ti? ¿Dijiste que tienes algo que discutir?
¿Y los hijos? ¿Cómo están?
Aide, Sultana, ¿sabes que estoy muy ocupado?
Ah, sí, el grande médico no tiene tiempo para su familia.
Sabes que no es justo esto. Laboro mucho y duro. ¿Y quién va a ayudar a mamá? ¿Le ayudarás con lo que ganas de tus watercolors?
Ya basta. Ya hemos tenido este Moabit demasiado. Ahora, aséntate.
¿Hay un problema? ¿Ha visto algo con mamá?
No, y a mí me parece que no hay ningún problema, más una hermosa oportunidad. ¿Sabes que hice esta prueba de DNA con Ancestry.com?
Sí, me acuerdo que descubriste que somos sefaradim. ¡Wow! ¡Qué shock te vendrá!
¿No te interesan vuestros orígenes?
Sultana, ya lo sabemos, no tengo menester de ninguna prueba de DNA para conocer mi identidad. Y también estas empresas no entienden nada de nosotros, de los sefaradim.
Allora, sí, no parecía saber que éramos sefaradí de Turquía. Diría que fuéramos italianos. Vámonos al punto.
Adelanta.
Topi alguno.
¿Alguno?
Sí, no lo entendí al empezar, no mienten los resultados. Tenemos otro hermano. Sí, mi reacción fue la misma.
No es posible.
Sí es posible y además es federal. Nuestro papá.
No lo digas. Papá quería bien a mamá. Le amaba, mi preciosa, mi tesoro. Es imposible.
Diana, no sabemos nada, Joe. No sabemos si era un hijico desde antes de sus bodas. No está seguro que sabía que tenía un otro hijo. Es posible que fuera fidel a nuestra mamá.
¿Te contactó?
No, mamá.
Gracias al Dios. Tienes menester de quitar tu DNA de este sitio pichín y...
No, lo que iba a decir es que tenemos menester de contactarle.
Sultana, ¿qué dices?
Es nuestro hermano, nuestra sangre, nuestra familia. Puede ser que no sepa que es sefaradí. Es tan importante que le hagamos saber quién es.
No habla nuestra relación, no sabe nuestra cultura, no es familia. Y mataría a la mamá saber esto, yo estoy seguro.
Un punto de calidez. Joe mira alrededor del Mushabac.
Me agrada esta nueva pintura que hiciste de mamá. ¡Qué hermosa! Nuestra madre es mujer muy hermosa. Mi energía no es fuerte y el tino no es como de antes. Cuando una persona tiene 85 años, las cosas trocan, ¿sabes?
Merci. Me dio mucho placer pintarla usando una foto de la fiesta del año pasado. Y pensaba...
Sultana,
Sí.
esta es otra cosa que me estabas diciendo. Quiero decirte que no hiciste bien con esta Ancestry.com. Quiero saber los factos antes de hacer algo. ¿Qué estabas pensando? ¿No sabes que con estas compañías hay mucho peligro? Sabes, estas personas no son médicos verdaderos. Unas veces te dan hierros muy seriosos, incluyendo muchos ciertos falsos. También los hacker Gs toman tu email y más venden tus datos. Debes pensar, la información no es privada. Un día tú vas a querer mercar seguridad y no podrás. ¿Por qué? Todo sobre tu salud está disponible en la calle pública y todos pueden meldarlo. Y tú no lo vas a saber o remarcar.
Yo, espera un punto. No lo hice para las cosas médicas, solamente para ambizarme de mi historia, nuestra historia, de nuestra familia.
Esto dices tú, la verdad es que no sabías los factos y van a haber problemas like always. Sos lonzo, Sultana. Solamente que un mabul de gente hace estas cosas que tú quieres hacerlas también.
Del mundo, no hay reposo de verdad. Todo contigo es miedo. No quería hablar contigo de cosas médicas, Joseph. Solo quiero hablar de esto que me ambezí. ¿No te maravilla, Joe? ¿Entiendes que tenemos ahora otro hermano es una cosa.
¿Qué importa para nosotros? ¿Qué quieres hacer? Tú vas a llamar por teléfono a este hombre. ¿Y para cuándo? De verdad, hay que pensar antes de hacer algo. Después vas a decir a mamá que su Beradam, su marido de 50 años, tenía hijo afuera de sus casamientos. De verdad, sos loca, Sultana. A la edad de 85, ¿vas a trocar lo que sabía toda la vida de su varón? No vale nada de estas cosas de años y paños. El pasado es el pasado.
Entiendo, Joseph. Y puede ser que tienes razón. No quiero que sufra nuestra mamá. Quiero muy mucho a mamá. No quiero que ella sufre. Sí, sería terrible.
Así es, Merci. Ahora estás pensando en lo que importa para la familia.
Ma, la verdad siempre importa, Joseph. Y tu madre siempre quería la verdad. Ella es persona inteligente y sabiduría. Y también papá murió 10 años atrás. Aunque no hay de medicarse sobre él.
Digo no, Sultana, que no llamas a esta persona, que no le digas a nuestra madre nada de esto y que tú y yo no hablemos más de esto. Si quieres matar a tu madre, seguro, díselo y va a tener ataque de corazón. ¿Quieres esto?
Padre piadoso, no sé cómo hablar contigo. Tú siempre sabes todo.
Y tú sos hija de una boba.
Nuestra madre no es boba y no soy yo hija de una boba.
Shalom.
Pishin una voz en el pasillo afuera del Mushabac y Joe y Sultana saltan. Sus mamás entran.
Shalom, Sultana Joseph. Soy yo, vuestra mamá, la boba.
Joe y Sultana están avergonzados.
Sentí todo que estabas diciendo. Entré en el apartamento. La puerta, como siempre, Sultana, no estaba cerrada con llave y me estaba metiendo lipstick en frente del espejo. Sabes, siempre me agrada aparecer hermosa. En frente del espejo estaba mirándome cuando sentí todo. Y quiero decir, todo está bien. No hay que medicarse. Vamos a telefonar a este varón.
Mamá, ¿qué estás diciendo? ¿Sabes quién es? ¿Sentiste todo, mamá?
Sí, seguro. Tu papá me dijo todo esto antes de casarnos. Y pensemos en juntos que estaba bien no decir nada de esto a ninguno. Y la familia de la mujer tenía bastante para saber, no hay merequía de eso. Va a esperar un punto. Decidme por qué pensáis los dos que soy yo tan vieja que no puedo ni pensar ni entender nada. Joseph, Sultana, yo débil, yo delicada. ¿Quiénes son lonzos? Vosotros dos. Ahora es el tiempo perfecto para invitar a este nuevo hermano y su familia para Shabbat con nosotros. Vos ruego de darme el nombre y mañana voy a telefonarle. A la fin, vamos a topar al otro hijo de vuestro padre y su familia. Y qué placer. Este Shabbat vamos a decir todos juntos el shehekiano con gusto.
El cabo.
Very nice.
Thank you. Okay.
So, any questions? Thank you for appearing with us. Thank you for being with us, Jane. This is the end of the Charlotte Shown. We're going to open it up to the audience. I'm going to unmute everybody. Unmute yourselves. Anybody have any questions
I
for
have
the audience?
Our
Bob.
family went through an exactly similar situation about 2-3 years ago with a cousin that we never knew we had. She turned out to be the daughter of my cousin David Gabay, who's now in Israel. And we debated what to do. We eventually spoke to him about it. This was before he had gotten married. And this woman, who turned out to have been raised Catholic, got to meet her 3 sisters in Israel. My cousin took her to Israel, and a delightful, delightful reunion. And she's still part of our family Facebook private page, where we have probably 60 or 70 cousins from all over the world.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Terrific. Yeah. Yeah, it was right after Ladino Day. I kept hearing from people who had just as you did, who wanted to tell me their stories, including one from Rabbi Nisim El-Nekaveh about somebody, I can't remember it now, but I think his life, this congregant, his life was saved by discovering this long lost daughter he didn't know about. That was a different situation, but his life was saved in that he thought he didn't have any relatives, and he discovered this daughter, and it changed his life. It was beautiful. So thank you, Bob. Yeah, there were others I heard from. Apparently a common situation in one way or another. So.
And I want to share the screen for a second again. Give me a second. Can do this again. Hold on. We have a poster here for the International New York City Ladino Day. You want to tell us a few things about this, Jane?
Sure. Okay. Well, I started Ladino Day with the American Sephardi Federation in the first one was 2018. And I knew there was an audience out there for for the writing that I was doing. And, you know, I have several other or 10 other articles, or I don't know, 20 articles and things about Sephardic Jews. So I knew there was an audience, and other cities had Ladino Day starting in 2013. And New York City hadn't done it. And New York City is the place in the United States with the most Sephardic Jews. So I finally got American Sephardi Federation. 2018 was our first Ladino Day. And, you know, everything was a little unsure what's going to happen. Well, the tickets sold out. The lines were around the block. The people were freaked. I can't get in. I must be there. I mean, there were so many people who didn't make it. The Center for Jewish History, and all told. And anyway, that was the first one, and that's when we decided to make it annual. So this is the 5th annual Ladino Day, and of course it's on Zoom like our one last year. The last 3 years, Brian and I have been curating it together, and it's great to work with Brian. So our program has Eliezer Papo. He'll talk about Haggadah, parodies in the Sephardic tradition of Sarajevo, especially. He'll talk about that. He'll read from this incredible Haggadah that was written during the Holocaust by the Yugoslav partisans who were able basically to throw out the Nazis. So it's very dramatic. And then we have Brian has a panel of nonagenarians, which is going to be fascinating.
I know, but I lost it here.
Oh, what'd you lose? Oh,
No, nothing. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
All right. Stanley's in the audience. He is one of the 90-year-olds who will be interviewed on Ladino Day, January 30th, on Brian's panel, and two other wonderful people in their 90s. So then we have children singing from Istanbul, Las Astraicas, and we have my play this year, which is based on the story I wrote for Aki Yerushalayim. And then we have the wonderful musical finale of Trio Sephardi. They were on our first year, year one of New York Ladino Day, and they're coming back and they'll be there on the 30th. So I hope you'll join us. You do need to register. Tickets now are actually $18, but you're going to have a great time. We've just always been packed with a great audience.
15 minutes.
Beautiful. So how are we doing here? Thank you, Jake. By the way,
Okay. Any questions from the audience, please?
it's
I don't see any hands.
Gloria.
Gloria.
Gloria, go ahead, Gloria.
No questions, but someone has to say, bravo, mashallah. Muchas gracias, Jane.
Thank
It's
you.
been such
Oh,
a
no, Jane,
wonderful
Jane,
journey
Jane.
into your
It
world,
was-
which
it
I
was
know I
Jane's
have the
program.
privilege of being a friend, but it was
Okay,
wonderful.
Jane.
Muchas
Jane, I'm
gracias.
going to give you my favorite refrane,
Yes.
which is a quote actually from the teacher of Rashi. Las canticas y las cuentas tiene más jochma que alguno otro derasha.
Ah, okay. Yeah, thank you. That's because when I had to switch from the Kabbalistic Miguel Cardozo from the 17th century to Johas stories, I knew that I was tapping into the great wisdom that was right here in our lives and in our memories and in our hearts. So thank you so much, Bob, for that.
If you notice, I just changed my background.
Well, here's-
Jane's co-director, Brian Kirshen, Dr. Brian Kirshen is, well, I don't know how you see it on your screens, but he's on the right. That's me, Rabbi Nekave, and Benny Aguado, who's in many YouTubes playing Johas, giving Johas stories on YouTube, if you go on YouTube. Thank you for all of you for being here. Our next event is on February 13th. If you go on our website, it's our Ladino Day with Susanna Behar. It's going to be live and in person. Jane, you can come down to Florida and see her live and in person.
Okay.
And we're
It's
still
not
working on
only-
the technology of whether we can stream it.
So
We'll be able to, but we're not sure yet.
at Temple Share Shalom. Bob is gonna see if we can stream it or not. But right now, it's only live. And then on March 22nd, that's on February 13th, a Sunday. On Tuesday, March 22nd, we have Daisy Sadaka Braverman to join us. So stay tuned. Go on our website, you'll see all of our programming. And
And I-
thank you all for being here.
I thank you. Jake is so wonderful to work with. We just had a great time. And so thank you, Jake. Thank you, Bob and Susan and all of the Sephardi Federation of Palm Beach County for sponsoring this wonderful HR Lashon. And thank you, everybody, for coming. It was really fun sharing my work and stories with you. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you so much, Jake. And
Merci
thank you,
mucho.
Jane. It was absolutely wonderful. We are so thrilled to hear all your stories and on your excerpts. Great, thank you. We look forward to it in the next one, Jake.
So go on Jane's website and you can read and buy and everything else.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Merci mucho,
Thank
Jane.
you.
Merci mucho, Jake, Bob.
Merci, Moon.
Vermos.